me just a second to set up my stream. Be right with ya. Almost there. So okay. Thank you for joining me. You're the man. Let's do another one. Let's do one.
Hey!
So, welcome back to my stream. We are back with Elden Ring, and I'm continuing my lore-through of Elden Ring, which probably has no really deep information for anyone. At the moment, I am grinding just a few more souls. I guess I gotta go through here a few times and level up before taking on what I think might be the last two things that there are to do before defeating any of the rune bearers, shard bearers, I guess. It's weird because they call them shards in the game. Oh my god, I hate these guys so much. So I'll explain in a second once I have a little bit more time. I really shouldn't be grinding for souls here anymore, but since this playthrough's been so haphazard, I haven't had a chance yet to find another spot, and I usually my other spot that I usually use is in Lindell, but I can't get in there right now. Of course you fell. Alright, so let's look at the map real quick. So what I've been, first of all, I started this playthrough just kind of like on a whim. I finished the game last year, got the platinum, everything. It's funny because when I when I got the platinum, I was like, "Oh, I've never really done this in a Souls game. You know, like gotten the platinum like as soon as it releases." I used to never really hunt trophies until basically Dark Souls Remastered came out. I decided, I was like, you know, I could probably make a good like pathway to the platinum trophy in this game. So I decided to do it, and then I was like, well, I've never gotten the platinum on the PS3 version. So I went back and did that, and then ever since then I've been getting the platinums in these games, and done a little bit of more trophy hunting in other games. But it's kind of a new thing for me, and I'm not by any means some kind of like game master or anything. You'll see for yourself when you see my gameplay. But lately there's been a lot of really great lore content coming out on YouTube. Sinclair Lore, Queelag, Tarnished Archaeologist, Human Justicar, Cosmos, or Cosmos. Some say Cause. Who else? I'm sure I'm missing somebody. Anyway, just hearing about all these theories, and you know, now that the game's been out for a while, people have had time to think about their theories and kind of, you know, put the more lucid thoughts out there, I guess. So I got really excited, but you know, and even the best of these videos, you know, sometimes they show you something very briefly, and I'm kind of a slow reader, and I like to really kind of take my time to look at things. And I didn't even have a save file for the game, so I was like, well, I guess I'll just start fooling around the game and, you know, just look at some stuff in the beginning or whatever. Well, it turned into like a full playthrough. But what occurred to me, it was like, I guess kind of the way the game gatekeeps you, because when I first played the game, as you might know, you might have had this experience when you first played Elden Ring. You know, the game kind of tricks you into thinking like, oh, the map's going to be like, you know, like this. And then you start exploring more, and you might find the Weeping Peninsula, which is not a peninsula, I guess it used to be. Or you might run into Caelid and be like, oh gosh, this world's pretty big actually. Or you might even stumble into Liurnia if you can find the shortcut, or if you've beaten Godric. And you're like, wow, this game is really pretty large. And then of course you find out later that there's all this to it. As you can see, some of it still unlocked or locked for me. And I just kind of started thinking like, well, there's definitely a significance in the game to getting to Lindell, right? And I just thought, well, you know, I guess everything else in the game would have to be not of lesser importance, but I guess they would, if they're trying to give you any kind of twist or surprise with the story, with the lore, they would have to gate that off with Lindell or anything in the mountaintops of the Giants. But everything else in the game would, you know, have to be readily available to anyone who comes around looking for it, right? So I decided, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to skip Lindell. I'm going to skip the Great Rune Bearers, and I'm just going to do everything else. Now, in the course of that, well, let me back up a little bit to what I was saying earlier. When I got the platinum last year, I was like, gosh, I hope I didn't burn myself out on this game, because I really love it, but I don't, at the moment, I didn't really see a reason to come back to the game. I was like, I guess I'll come back for the DLC, or, you know, maybe a couple of years down the line, we'll see how I feel about it. Well, like 2 days later, I started another playthrough, which went for like I think like 120 hours, and I was really impressed with the game because I found a lot more stuff that I hadn't found before. Now I did use a guide for a few things in my first playthrough because I didn't really want to mess up any major quest lines. It ended up not really being a thing because you can pretty much do everything in this game. I can't, right off the top of my head, I can't think of many things that you get locked out of, at least not easily. You know, even some of the, like the NPC quests are pretty hard to mess up. Certainly up to this point, I'm sure that, you know, it kind of changes. Again, I'm not an expert on all these things, so I'm just kind of going by what is easily found. But yeah, I don't have like an encyclopedic knowledge of, you know, all the possibilities in the game. So I'm sure there are some things that I've even locked myself out of, and I'm just not aware of them. But it seems like for the most part, the game is pretty open, especially up to this point. After that, we'll see. But for now, as you can see, I've been pretty thorough. And oh, the other thing is that I found even more stuff in this playthrough that I had never seen before or was even aware of. Yeah, this game is fucking big. Really fucking big. And I really appreciate the people that do lore for this game now, because even compared to Dark Souls, Bloodborne, there are just so many different things, and some of them are similar or even actually related to each other in game, in the lore, that I've really found it a challenge to sift through it and have a coherent thought about anything. To the point where, like, even sometimes I'll find something, I'll be like, oh, this must be that, and then you kind of think about it more and you're like, well, gosh, I'm really not sure anymore. I'll just give you one quick example. I was fighting that horrible, terrible dragon that is here, Lanciax, I believe, the one that's related to Vike. And I just noticed this time around that that dragon has feathers, which is interesting and maybe not significant. I'm sure, I assume it probably has some significance, but it's at least interesting because dragons aren't usually portrayed with feathers. But, you know, there's some similarity between dragons and dinosaurs in our real world, in the sense that we think of them as these ancient lizards, and, you know, it's kind of like, what became of them? Oh, wouldn't it be cool if you saw one, if it came back? But that seems to almost imply that the dragons are evolving into something that maybe we see later, or maybe nothing, but you don't really know. But if you look carefully, you'll see that some of the statues in Volcano Manor, especially around the temple here, if you step out of the temple and kind of start getting into this other complex, which leads to, well, back to the manor, but also to Rykard. I believe it's right here, actually. There's that part where there's a little underground cave full of basilisks, and there's something in there. But the statues that line that area are statues of snakes, which makes sense for Volcano Manor, because they worship a snake, or they're, you know, teamed up with a snake. But the snakes have a scaly head, but a feathery body, and wings with feathers. So That's quite a lot. Now, sometimes I do get the feeling that sometimes, like, Miyazaki or maybe somebody at FromSoft is just like, just put a snake with feathers and wings on there. Like, let them fucking figure it out. So, I don't really know if there's any actual significance, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that there's something to it, at least. But anywho, I think, anyway, that I'm getting somewhat close to the end of what I can do before getting into Lindell. So the only really things I have left to do are Ariza Side Tomb, Ariza Hero's Grave. Let's go ahead and put some markers on there. And I have to finish up Shaded Castle. But before I do that, I wanted to beat this last iteration of the Bell-Bearing Hunter. Who is just kicking my ass every single time I try to fight him. Sorry, my mouse is getting ridiculous. But I think that's about it. Oh, there's the... Oh, I should put a marker here too, actually. There's that monster. What is it? It's like a gargoyle, but it's a black gargoyle. He might be a little too tough. So I might just have to come back. I remember him kicking my butt even late into my other playthroughs. But yeah, I think I've done everything else. Obviously, it's hard to know. There's no kind of like checklist. Certainly not in game. Even outside of the game, I don't know if I would even want to try to look at something. But yeah, I think I've gotten just about everything. And we'll see. So that's kind of the goal for this playthrough. I've just been bouncing from place to place. I didn't really have that detailed an agenda when I started, so I even kind of just started like I was skipping stuff in Limgrave because I was like, hey, I don't care about this. And then later I was like, no, it all matters. It's all part of the cookie. So I may very well have missed things, but we'll see. The interesting thing is that since I started very underpowered, and actually have kind of resisted leveling up to some extent, because I'm more interested at the moment in like buying up anything that merchants have, just to, you know, in case I want to look at the description for it. So I've actually spent a lot of money just shopping, really. Let me show you my stats real quick. So I'm level 90. I'm going for an intelligence build, but you know, I'm not really a magic kind of guy, so it's, as you can see, strength and dexterity are up there. I like having my endurance high because I like to be geared up. So it's a little bit of everything. I don't think I could ever really do a just sorcery or incantation run. Let me look at my time here. 131 hours. So I've put a lot of time into this. And funnily enough, haven't had, I guess because I've been spending my money so much, I haven't had too many like catastrophic losses of runes. with the exception of somewhat recently at Gelmir Hero's Grave, which that place could just go fuck itself, actually. What a troll. But at least I've got it figured out this time, so I think next time I play the game, shouldn't be an issue. But I don't really like it when game developers troll the players that way, to that extent. Feels a little cruel. But I guess FromSoft can earn it. And you know, I've made lots of observations about the game. I still think the game really has a problem with bosses, in the sense that they're often cheap and really annoying to fight, unfortunately. Despite you know, a lot of them being really cool looking and just having interesting attacks and everything, but a lot of the I'll call them health bar bosses as opposed to like just regular creatures. Although a lot of regular mob enemies also suffer from the same problem, like the pests in this area, which is that they, you know, and this might, I'm not using like the heaviest weapons, but I am using a pretty strong weapon. Meteoric blade, and just like the high poise that a lot of enemies have, where they just ignore even like double-handed strong attacks, or you know, you slash them once and then they take damage but don't have any kind of stun animation, so that like before your second slash can even hit them, they're halfway across the arena, or all the way across the arena. Don't really enjoy that too much. But I have to say that aside from that, this game is continuing to impress me even more than it did last year when it came out. I mean, God, what? This is pretty incredible. I was a little worried about this game when it was announced. Whoa, hello. Oh yeah, the camera is really screwing. The lock-on is even worse than it has always been. You know. Lock-on's always been funny in these games, but in this game it's really not good. But even those minor flaws can't really take away from the game. This is an incredible achievement for FromSoft. Like I was saying, I was a little worried when it was first announced because they were, you know, essentially just raising the scale of the project by so much. There's so many things that could have gone wrong in this game, or that they could have just, you know, run out of time to do it. And it's really a testament to their commitment to quality, to providing their players with a quality experience, that they delayed the game relatively briefly compared to other games. But you know, this game worked out of the box. It's hard to say that about modern games. This game is huge. It's incredible, and it worked, and it still works. Sure, there've been some patches, but I can't imagine a lot of people are crying about this game's technical aspects. The game just has a lot of like weird combat moments. You're about to see one where this pest is like wound up to... It's a trap, basically. But it's just weird the way it behaves, like you can't really... I don't know, it's odd. It feels different. I don't know that I can quantify it like on a technical level. But there are little moments where you feel a little scripted. The bell-bearing hunter is another great example where that guy is just like there's a lot of attacks that like kind of stick you to the ground for a second, and then you end up taking damage from attacks that you really should have been able to dodge. Oh, hello. Sorry about that. So I'm really doing this playthrough's got me really excited for the DLC, which we don't know anything about, really, except for that one image that was released, which obviously has had all kinds of speculation surrounding it. But we don't really know anything about it. So people have said maybe it's in the future, maybe it's in the past. You know, we don't know if there's going to be a new area on the map. Maybe a new lair, kind of like the way the underground is. We just don't know. But I'm really excited to find out. And we will just have to see what happens. I don't really want to speculate. I guess if you put a gun to my head and said, what do you think the DLC is going to be? Well, I think that the image represents America. Or at least it's more likely to represent America than Mikola. I know a lot of people really want to find out what is Mikola's deal. But I think by now, people who want answers from these games should know that FromSoft has no problem just completely embarrassing people who put themselves out on a limb to speculate, you know, in detail as to what's going to happen. So I'm not going to do that. As far as like time travel, I'm not exactly sure why people are so convinced that there's time travel involved. I mean, I guess the fact that yeah, we're good. Well, I guess the fact that if that's Marika or Mikola in the image, both who are characters that you know are immobile in present day in the game, then yeah, it would make sense that we're either after these events or before. But yeah, I would say like FromSoft is really good at misdirection. People have really come down hard before and said, oh yeah, this DLC, I know it has to be this, I know it, and then it's like, nope, you were wrong. It's hard to say for sure. But I'm just excited to get more. Like I don't care. I don't really need the stories to line up perfectly. I mean, I think let's see. I would say the DLC for Dark Souls 1 and for Bloodborne are the ones that most satisfyingly kind of fit into the rest of the story. I guess Dark Souls 2 fits in to their stories, but I still I always kind of had the feeling in those DLCs that it was really like written well to fit in, but still to me feels like an afterthought, or not an afterthought, but a retcon, I guess. Not necessarily in the negative sense, but certainly something that was written after the rest of the game was written, or and written with, you know, a sense of like looking back and be like, okay, now that this game that I made is out, I kind of have a better, a clearer perspective on it, and now I'm going to write some DLC for it. That's what Dark Souls 2's DLC feels like. Dark Souls 3 is kind of a different thing because I really enjoy those DLCs, but they are a little too retcon-y for me. Whereas I feel that Dark Souls 3 does a good job of rounding out the trilogy in kind of a safe way, where you're like, you can't get too offended by this. I feel like the DLCs are a little, not offensive necessarily, that's too strong a word, but like, you know, like the fact that Gale is the final boss of Dark Souls 3, obviously not including the Soul of Cinder, but he's kind of like the last encounter of the game, of the games, of the series. And he's a character that's first introduced in the first DLC of the game, and then his story wraps up in the second DLC. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, I think, like, I know that FromSoft had a tough time ahead of them trying to like wrap everything up, but I would have been much happier if like Solaire. I mean, I'm just kind of throwing that out there. I don't literally think Solaire should have been the final boss of Dark Souls 3, but like a character that we knew better, that was just a little bit more part of the story before. You know, Gale is fine. He's interesting in his own right, but I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense that he's the main baddie. And in general, the Ring City I have issues with because it just feels a little bit retconned, I guess. Which it is. It was like, oh, remember the furtive pygmy that we never talked about, ever? Not even once? I mean, I guess like Manus kind of references the furtive pygmy. I guess that's kind of loose. That's always felt a little bit more loose to me than other people, I think. Okay, you can stop now. Thank you. I guess I did this before. Yeah, I did all this. I must have come down here a while ago. I don't remember. Let's go ahead and heal up. So yeah, I'm not trying to shit on Dark Souls 3. I really enjoyed that game. Loved the hell out of it when it came out. My opinion tempered a little bit as time went on. But when it first came out, I played that game for like 600 hours just that summer. Much like Elden Ring, actually. I put a lot of time into this game too. But then when I went back to it, it just kind of didn't feel as fresh. Probably because when Dark Souls 3 came out, I hadn't really touched any of the Souls games, except for Demon Souls, which I usually at least start a playthrough of that once a year, because I just love that game so much. But that game's lore is also separate from Dark Souls. But when Dark Souls 3 came out, I had not been really in the mix of Dark Souls for a while. So that game felt really fresh. Since then, when I finished that game and eventually put it down, I went back to Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Dark Souls 2, Bloodborne, of course. And then when I came back to Dark Souls 3, it was a little bit like, oh, yeah, okay, that's pretty good. I think some of the seams show a little bit more in that game. So when this was coming out, I was a little worried, like, oh my god, I hope they don't screw it up. Also, like I got a PS4 to play Dark Souls 3 because FromSoft had such a bad reputation when it comes to their PC versions of games that I thought, like, well, I don't know if they're going to nail this. Let me just go ahead and play it on a console. And it played great on a PS4, but apparently they got their shit together and put out a really nice version of Dark Souls 3. But you know, they've always had a few technical issues, frame pacing and stuff is kind of an issue. And when they were talking about the scale of what they wanted to do with Elden Ring, it worried me a lot. I was like, I don't know. But I was really impressed. When this game came out, I was still playing on just a PS4, like a base PS4. I'm playing on a Pro now, but I was really impressed with how the game ran. I really didn't have many problems. I think, you know, some of the later boss fights with really huge enemies, like Elden Beast, gave me some stutter, and some of the textures, you know, don't load on time every time. But overall, everything worked really well. And one thing, this might be my fault, because of the weird way, my physical location in the game and my level. I don't know if this is too late game for level 91, but I have not been able to get any co-op for quite a while, actually. I had one boss fight where I found a couple people, but ever since then, nothing. I don't know, maybe I'm playing at odd hours. 7:39 p.m. on a Monday. Doesn't seem that far out of the question. And I'll check it again. But yep, no password. Nothing going on there. So kind of weird. I would always rather fight with human players as opposed to Well, I do like the NPCs actually, and I don't mind the Ashes of War, but you know they're like they are what they are. They don't really do anything too crazy. But there's nothing like getting a person in there to help you. Well, I guess it's not going to happen here either, so we'll just... Now, I don't think I've been in this boss room, even though I finished the dungeon part. Well, I know one of these is 2... whatchamacallit? Crucible Knights. And the other one is 2 gladiators, I think, or something like that. We'll see. Or not, just one gladiator. Oh, he's got the... the delayed attacks. Yeah, not a fan. Soul Jars of Fortune. Awesome. What do I get? 17,000. Wow. Okay. Well, I'll take it. I guess, actually, I'm gonna go back to the round table hold. I think I have some weapons I can upgrade. By the way, this is the first time I've like mostly focused on intelligence. I did a little bit at the end of my first playthrough.
Well,
and my second playthrough was mostly a faith-based build. So I've actually had a lot of fun looking at new weapons. Like, I don't think I ever use this weapon again. The famous moon veil that everyone talks about. Oh, wow. Ooh. Well, that's exciting. Get this sucker going. So yeah, I think that's what's really cool about this game because you know, all the games have had a bunch of variety in terms of like weapons. This game just has tons and tons and tons of things to use. So, and quite a few of them are very high level. So you really, it really is a treat to get to later later levels and you know, get to use this stuff that you never could before. A lot of variety in the game. That's really great. Should I just go ahead and buy those? I'm not. Despite my build, I'm not actually using that many spells. I just cannot get in the habit of that. I'll come back for you later. You know, I started playing these games back in with Demon Souls, and I happened to find early on in that game the Uchigatana, and I just thought it was so cool that there's a, you know, a ninja sword in this game, and I ended up using it for the whole playthrough, and in Dark Souls, I ended up, I was going to say by mistake, but it's more like out of frustration. I ended up finding the Uchigatana in that game. If you don't know, the only way you can get the Uchigatana early in that game is by killing one of the merchants. And I was just in a bad mood because I kept getting killed by something, and this guy drops that sword, and I'm like, hey, it's my favorite weapon. So that really became my my weapon for that playthrough. And of course, Dark Souls 2, because it ruins everything, has to like ruin getting the Uchigatana. You can't get it until much later in the game. Dark Souls 2, what a shitty game. But in Dark Souls 3, it's, I think I don't know, I feel like they wanted to make the weapon seem special because they have that mini, or not mini boss, NPC, I guess, who, the sword master that you get the Uchigatana from, he's pretty hard to beat if you're just starting out in that game. Not so much, you know, nowadays. But, and it's a great weapon for that game, especially in the early days of Dark Souls 3, before they nerfed bleed a little bit. Let me tell you a secret, it's really not that nerfed anyway. Bleed is bleed, but they did nerf it a little bit. But in the early days, oh my god, you could just bleed anything in that game. So it was pretty awesome. Had a lot of utility out of that. And that was basically my playthrough for that game. So I've always really been a strength and dexterity and equipment load. That started with Demon Souls 2. Like, gotta raise that equipment load. I don't like fat rolling. It wasn't until I was preparing for a platinum run in Dark Souls Remastered by going through Dark Souls on PS3 that I started branching out, and Faith was what got me because the Astora Straight Sword, if you don't remember, it's a faith-based, just a longsword. But in Dark Souls 1, it can be pretty strong.
Well,
I hadn't really thought about it for years until I was playing Dark Souls 3, and I was streaming, and somebody was like, oh, hey, you're really close to the Astora Straight Sword. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that from the first game. I kind of picked it up and I was like, oh, faith. I don't do faith. So I didn't really use it, but that made it stick out in my mind. And because of its location in Dark Souls 1, I was like, huh, maybe there's something to faith in this build, and I ended up making a build just based on faith. It worked out really well. So that actually became the basis for my platinum run, which is nothing special, just kind of like a shorter way to play the game, so you don't have to go to new game plus 20 to get everything. You know, it's kind of an efficient run more than a speed run or anything like that. All right. Ooh, sorry, I'm a little sleepy today. I have cut back on my caffeine intake, and my sleep patterns are all over the place. Well, let's just go get some arrows. Now, I think this is the place where there's 2 Crucible Knights. I'm pretty sure of that. And now that I'm remembering, I'm still pretty sure I still haven't beat that one that is in the Eternal City. So I think next we'll go fight that guy, and then we'll see if I can make any progress with these guys.
It's always a pleasure. Goodbye.
It's kind of annoying, the only way over there is having to go through all this. Alright. See there? Yep, still there. Okay. Glad I remembered. Not glad I still have to fight him. We'll see how it goes. Oh, I found. Let's see if I can. You talking to me? I don't see nobody else here. You must be talking to me. Alright, we'll see. Hi, no, no, go away. Step away from the edge, sir. Step away from the edge. Ah! Get away from the edge. Might as well. Please stop. 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 Well, it's a lot easier when you level up your weapon 3 times. Just have to get that smithing stone 7. Makes a big ass difference. Well, well, well. Isn't that pretty? This is a pretty game. I'm trying to remember. So you get up. There's so many different parts of this game. You get lost. I think that's where you. Is it further up? Like I seem to remember there's a part where there's a bunch of platforming around some columns. Yeah, I remember now. I think some of what I remember I think is up there, but I don't know. I guess I'll get to it when I get to it. Oh yeah, because it's the other part of the city, right? Which you can only get after we're done. Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. And then there's Moog's Palace. What a hateful, vile part of the game that is. You know, like many of FromSoft's games, the later sections are kind of a slog. That's one thing about FromSoft is they've never really seemed to get a handle on difficulty in later parts and DLCs, like it just seems like they're just like just make them spongy and high hit points. You know, it's just I'm kind of tired of fighting this enemy before I actually defeat him. But hey, no developer's perfect. And as far as chinks in your armor, I think that's a pretty reasonable one. Damn, this area just looks awesome. That first time you take that elevator down, oh man. Oh man. Alright. Ooh, I can think of one other thing I need to do. I don't think I've completed this. No, because I would have the talisman. So actually, let's go there. Yeah, I guess I should be able to do this, right? These guys aren't too tough. You do have to do them all together. Maybe I'll regret not putting all my flasks towards health, but yeah, no, I haven't even been down here. Yes, of course. Whoa. Literally thought about that the second it happened. Get away without using any flasks so I can just heal. Cool. So as far as lore, one of the things that I've noticed in the game is, well, a couple things. It's hard to say definitively, but there does seem to be a kind of correlation between age and geographical location, to some degree anyway. As far as Far Missoula, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that is supposedly the oldest culture in the lands between, or the oldest human culture at least, because I'm not sure where they put the giants in, as far as a timeline. But Far Missoula, which is over here, supposedly the oldest, and then Caelid, I'm not sure that Caelid has necessarily its own culture, but if you look at the landscape there, it's more rounded as opposed to having like sharp edges. And as you might know from geology, like older mountain ranges and geographical features get eroded by water and rain, so they tend to round out. If you look at Limgrave and Liurnia, excuse me, they have very sharp protrusions of land. Like especially if you look at this little mesa, that is really has the look of something that's either been like thrust upwards or where the land around it has fallen off in big chunks suddenly. Limgrave, I hadn't really noticed that before, but it does if you look at it from far away. Like if you kind of go out to Liurnia and look out over here, or maybe come to Caelid, you'll really notice those sharp, broken-looking pieces of land. And then you also go, in terms of elevation, well, it's funny, ironically, Farum Azula is now up in the air, but according to my theory, it would have been the lowest, so maybe like almost sea level for that entire city or complex, with Caelid kind of going up into Limgrave, and then Limgrave giving way to Liurnia, which is high up, but then has this big sunken part in the middle. But still, you go up, 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 up as you go north, and that takes you to the Altos Plateau, which is higher, and then of course Mount Top of the Giants is higher than that. I'm not totally convinced about the like age of cultures necessarily, but there does seem to be a couple of things pointing to that. The other thing I noticed is that the towers, and I wish I had this open because I can't really be sure, but as far as I remember, there is no, you don't access this, but there is a divine tower here. And unless I'm mistaken, you don't access it in the game. So that's, maybe that's, you know, who knows, DLC stuff. We'll see. There's still plenty of room in the map, too. And I've been really intrigued by the water around the continent, because there's a lot of weird stuff. There's this, which seems to be some kind of vortex, but then these guys are like, no problem, we'll head right over there. This guy and his son just paddling away, or paddling towards it. These guys are paddling away. I don't know where they're going. It's gonna be far, wherever you're going. What else? There's ships. This ship is attacked and sailing towards the lands between. We'll go back up there in a second. There's another ship. This one's not doing too good. Looks like it's about to sink. It's been destroyed. You might think, oh, okay, well, these are the survivors, but they're pretty far. Seems like they could have gone a little bit closer. I guess this is all pretty steep. But then over here is Radahn's arena, so it's like, is that where you wanted to go? Where else? There's more. I think there's more stuff over here. Yeah, some more guys on boats. Of course, I don't know what's behind that. These ships seem to be fine. You know, Lindell is a big city, but there's no water commerce to it because you can't get up there. So I thought that was unusual. On the other hand, the rest of these shorelines aren't really accessible. Like, none of them have anything in it, no kind of port. In fact, I can't think of a location anywhere in the game that feels like a port. It's like everybody's just teleporting here, I guess. But then what are these ships doing here then, right? So that's interesting. And then this caught my eye, because not only do you have the vortex or some kind of major water disturbance around it, but there's obviously a rock that's either fallen or maybe just a geographical feature that's big enough that it's sticking up out of the water. But when you actually go there, you can't see anything here. Unless maybe by clearing up the rest of the map, there might be, you know, the fog around here might clear up. But so far, I spent a lot of time on cliff sides around here, and I was not able to ever get a view, even of just the water, you know. So it's like, I don't know. Are they hiding something, or are they just like, ah, don't worry about it too much. It's just a drawing. And then these guys up here are, you know, have actual faces, kind of an expression. They don't look too happy. This guy looks really stressed. He's really regretting buying a ticket on this boat. These guys are sinking. So yeah, this boat is destroyed. And then there's, you know, all this space up here. Again, makes me really curious as to what the DLC is going to bring us. Oh, and by the way, I've tried putting markers, like, you know, as far away as like here, and they kind of basically, when you go up here and look, it just looks like they're like right around here. So I don't think the game's really rendering out anywhere near that far. Although I will say, if you look out westward from here, you see a landmass. But it's hard to know what to make of that because the game doesn't give you any explanation as to where really you came from, what it was like or anything. But there's lots of hints throughout the game of the lands that are not the lands between. I guess the lands at the edges. Like Roderica and anyone in the Nobles set is said to have come from far, you know, distant lands. Give me a prompt. Can I get a prompt? You can now see the Knight of Great Jar's red summons. Knight of the Red Jars. So I never actually knew you had to talk to him. I just assumed he showed up. I didn't notice that. Let's see. So there's a little wizard. I guess it was the first one. Touche. Oh, wow. That has changed since I last played this game. Interesting. Okay.